Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Ronald Johnson, Publitarian, coming at you again with another episode of Publitarian Podcast. We are up to episode number 24 now. I have 700 something
Publitarian Podcast.
So I am super stoked for that. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show. I hope that I'm providing some kind of commentary, insightful information, or at least some form of entertainment. Or maybe I'm just droning on while you're getting to your commute. You know, however I can help. I'm just here to help. Anyway, like I was saying, we're up to episode number 24 now. And I think I'm going to call this episode, Is This Racist? And I'm probably going to do the classic meme that's been floating around of the robot learning about things in life. Why talk about racism now? Well, because I don't want to talk about Judge Kavanaugh anymore. That's all that's in the news right now. And we are witnessing police state tactics in real time. We are literally seeing guilty until proven innocent. We're seeing Salem witch trials happening. We're seeing a man being taken down with zero evidence. And I am very passionate and very angry about it. So I'm trying to stay away from the topic because it's not really in our hands right now anyway. It's in the hands of the Senate and about 3 rhino senators. And only thing we can do is call them and email them and let our voices be heard. But I'm assuming if our voices being heard mattered to those 3 Republican senators, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. So that's why I'm steering clear of the Kavanaugh commentary like all the rest of the podcasters and newscasters are doing. It's pretty much just sucked up all the air. And rightly so, it is a big deal happening. But you guys know where I stand on conservative issues, libertarian issues. And I mean, one of the big cornerstones of our republic is being innocent until proven guilty. Especially being innocent and if there's absolute zero evidence against you. It's like I heard Limbaugh talking about the other day, or maybe it was Bongino, one of them, of someone just coming down the street and going, "Hey, you stole my cell phone. I'm going to call the police." And the person goes, "Well, I see your cell phone right there. Doesn't matter. I'm going to call the police. Tell them you stole my cell phone." There you go. The person's made an accusation. And now it's up to you to defend on why you didn't. It's not up to the other person to... It's just up to them to accuse. And then you have to backpedal and defend yourself. Rather than you, the accuser, showing the proof. There is this new media narrative or a shift. Attempt at one anyway. That is going to paint anyone as racist or white supremacist. Even non-white people. I bet you didn't know that, but Candace Owens, a black woman, by the way, she is now a white supremacist. Kanye West flirting with becoming a white supremacist. If you have an R behind your name now, that doesn't stand for Republican. That stands for racist. So if you are in the Republican Party, you are a racist. And those lines of racism are being more and more clearly defined by the other side of the aisle, ironically enough, that is racist. The party that is so focused on what color your skin is, what group you belong to, how you're going to vote. The party that defines racism and has defined it in our American Republic for 2 centuries. Ironic, isn't it? They are the ones that gets to define what racism is. KKK, slavery, Jim Crow laws, segregation, all hallmarks of the Democrat Party. And I'll argue and also say the Great Society and the quote-unquote war on poverty. All tools of the Democrat Party. And they still get to set the definitions and terms of what is racist and what isn't racist. The reason this tactic works is because calling someone
a racist is one of the most horrible things you can call a person, if the most horrible thing you can call a person. So it automatically puts you on the defensive. And we know it works because we've all done it. Anybody on our side of the aisle, Republican, Libertarian, if someone comes at you and says, well, you're a racist, then you're automatically knocked back 50 feet, even though it shouldn't be a surprise to you anymore because that's the tactic that they use. It still knocks us back. And then we have to pull this, pedigree out of our pockets, this political pedigree, I call it, where, well, I have 4 black friends, and some of my best friends are black, and I voted for Barack Obama. And you have to start listing reasons of why you're not racist. And I hate that we continue to be put in that position. The simple answer is don't go on the defensive. Remember, the burden of proof in a society where you are innocent until proven guilty is on the other party. That's why this Kavanaugh thing is so dangerous. Boom, here I go talking about Kavanaugh again, and I said I wasn't going to. If we start this shift in our society where somebody is guilty until proven innocent, that is a slippery, slippery slope, my friends. We're talking like police state on the way. And that's just not where we need to be. But while we are still yet in a society where we are innocent until proven guilty, don't go on the defensive. Remember, the burden of proof in a society where you're innocent until proven guilty is on the other party. One of my favorite tactics that I like to use if it is thrown at me is it's an old Neil Bortz tactic, and ask them to define racism. And 9 times out of 10, you will get an incorrect definition of racism. And you can automatically say, all right, you are calling me something you do not know the definition of. And now, see how that's shifted now back on the other party? Because I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to know what a racist is. Look up racism in the dictionary, and it's not the term that gets bandied about nowadays. Racism to the Democrats is disagreeing with a liberal policy. That's what they think racism means. But that's not what it means. An actual, real racism, as I said in my opener, is one of the most horrible things you can call somebody. That means that you believe that one race is genetically superior to another race. And that's horrible. Another thing that I like to do, again, shift that burden back onto them, not onto you. It's not up to you to prove that you're not racist. It's up to them to prove that you are racist. And they won't be able to do it if you're not a racist. Say, okay, cite some examples of how I'm being racist. You will either get met with crickets or liberal talking points, which again will have a lot of things to do with liberal policies and not the melanin component of a human being. Or you can go on a fence and attack them for being a racist because they're a liberal. Then you can really get into some fun. Talk about the history of the Democrat Party. Talk about the KKK. Talk about the Jim Crow laws. Talk about segregation. Talk about why the Republican Party was created solely for the purpose of abolishing slavery. And see how successful they can defend themselves. The only defense they're going to come up with is the supposed big switch. And if you're unfamiliar with the big switch, there was supposedly in history in the 60s a big switch where all the racist white Democrats became Republicans. The only problem is it didn't happen. There was no big switch. Strom Thurmond, who was a Dixiecrat, became a Republican. That was the big switch. And he did that for political reasons. There were no other racist Democrats that became Republicans. They just stayed racist Democrats. And when LBJ came up with the great idea of the Great Society, I feel that he found a way to keep black people, well, down and voting Democrat. We'll have these N-words voting Democrat for the next 50 years. He's famously quoted in the memoirs of, I can't remember the book now, one of the guys that was close to him. LBJ was also famous for calling the original 1957 Civil Rights Act as the N-word bill. It's a Democrat. The Democrats and the liberals have always been racist. Even your white liberals of today's society, they're the racist ones. They think that black people need their help. They think that it's up to them to make sure that African Americans succeed, because a black person apparently can't do it on their own without the help of a self-righteous white liberal. They just feel that minorities can't get ahead without their help. And not to go on a rant about liberalism, because I certainly could, but this is why liberalism is so powerful. It takes these emotions, like these charges of calling someone a racist, and it banks on those emotional reactions. Liberalism, it's powerful because it banks on emotional reactions. Americans are generous and will listen to a sob story. And liberalism knows this. And that's why it's such an effective tool. Because Americans in general, we know how good we have it, and we have a big heart, and we are generous, and we want to give, and we want to help out. And liberalism knows this. And it uses our own giving, charitable ways against us to forward its own leftist agenda. I've talked about a few different points from history on this podcast, and liberals want us stuck in history. Liberalism and liberals want us stuck in history. They want us tied to our mistakes rather than learning and growing from them. And of course, when I'm talking about mistakes, I mean, obviously like slavery and, just bad chapters in our American history. But think about those times. Think about back then of what happened in history. Like, obviously, like slavery, because it's one of the most horrible examples in our American history. So it would be as asinine as if your kid were doing something wrong and you held it over your kid's head for the rest of his life, rather than having a knowledge that he has an opportunity to grow from the mistake. So you catch your kid like cheating on a test, I don't know, or just doing something wrong, some kind of disciplinary thing that happened as a kid, and you just bring it up. He's like 50 years old, and you're still like, I can't believe you cheated on that test in 3rd grade. You're a horrible human being. What right do you have to be a human being on this earth of what you did back then? See, that's pretty asinine, isn't it? Now multiply that to a global scale. And look at our country's history. And that's what liberalism is doing. And that's where liberalism wants us. Liberalism wants us tied and defined to those mistakes of history, rather than learning and growing from mistakes. I mean, that's how we learn and grow, is from mistakes. So rather than moving forward, they want us tied back to what's happened in this country. And again, ironically, history that liberals and Democrats did. Sometimes a liberal will ask you, how can you support America when it's done X, Y, and Z? Obviously, again, slavery being the big hot button. How can you support America when it's had these things happen in their past? And ask them right back, how can you not support America when it's done these things positively? When we have corrected and learned and grown from these mistakes? And look around in 2018, there's still slavery in the world. There's still oppression in the world. There's still women that need first wave feminism, at least, in the world. And where are you guys at on that? You don't really want to make a difference. You want to sit in America and be cushy and feel like you're making a difference. And I think it comes from one of our human natures or characteristics. Like, we feel like we have to matter. We feel like that we need to leave our impression on the world. Liberalism knows that as well. And it banks on people that are like that, because we're all like that. We all feel like want to matter, to do something. Same thing with recycling. I've been to the landfills. I've seen where the recycling goes. It all goes in the same pile that the other trash goes a lot of the times. But we feel better because we feel like we're making a difference. And that's why liberalism culturally is so popular via means of social justice and other avenues like that. There is no social justice. There's only justice. But we feel bad because we've been made culturally to feel bad. We don't want to take a broad look at this history and see what we've done to get to where we're at. The positive, the free market capitalism to get to where we are now. The liberals want to just see these mistakes that we've made throughout history as a country, and everybody's made mistakes. And they want to focus on those mistakes that have been made, but not see the growth and the positive things that have happened because of these mistakes. Oh, there goes the beer fridge. And in a free society like ours, liberalism does have an opportunity, like a growth space to crop up. One of my famous quotes that I attribute to myself, that I get from myself, is liberalism is the afterbirth of freedom. Whenever you have a free society, when anybody can do whatever they want, liberalism will creep up. Because there's so much freedom and minimal struggle that people have paid for, but the next generation doesn't see that. So they're made to feel guilty for it. I really didn't mean to go on a huge rant about liberalism. I was really wanting to talk about racism today, and it ended up spilling into liberalism. But I hate that culturally we've let the country come to where it is. And I'm not speaking like this like from an old fart standpoint. Like even when I was 15, I thought we weren't culturally where we needed to be. We've let the left side of the aisle just win the culture war. And we keep thinking that, well, we have the moral high ground, so everything will work out in the end. No. We brought a knife to a gunfight, basically. And liberalism has banked on this as well. And that's why these huge feelings of racism, to tie it all back in, still exist. We've allowed them to. We keep going on the defensive rather than the offensive. And then we make fun of people like Kanye West that puts on his Donald Trump hat and dares to call himself a free thinker. But because he's not towing that pure conservative line, he may have some things that he doesn't like about guns or whatever, then we have no use for him. And that's where we make our mistake. When I say we, I mean conservatives, libertarians, anybody that's not a freaking left-wing liberal nutbag. That's where we make the mistake. And I talked about this in my first podcast episode. We want that pure, like unadulterated conservatism that drops from the sieve while all the other stuff gets filtered out. And that's not possible in this melting pot of a country that we're in. We're going to have disagreements. We're going to have different ways of thinking. It's one of the definitions of who we are as Americans. We all like to we all have that individualism where we want to think for ourselves, do for ourselves, and that's being torn down too by the culture. And there is a culture now that's been taught for decades that government will do that for us. Government will take care of us. All we need is let the government take care of us. Be sure to vote all the bureaucrats back in and just enjoy your sports and entertainment. And I hate that that's what it's come to. But we as conservatives and libertarians and just free thinkers even just need to wake up and start realizing to stop going on the defensive about racism and start winning this culture war. Start taking these people that want to be in our movement and let them be in the movement. Let them join. So we can turn this around. So we actually have a country. Because we may not in the next generation if we keep letting this stuff happen the way it is. I'm glad we have a fighter like President Trump that's not afraid to get down in the mud and kick and fight. And we need to follow his example and do that as well. And the reason I say that is we've been the good guys. We've been the moral guys. We've been the nice guys for decades. And it's gotten us nowhere in the culture or in the political field, for that matter, because we continue just to be the nice guys, and we won't get down in the mud and kick like our current president is doing. So don't come at me and tell me that we need a nice guy. We had a nice guy, Mitt Romney, a frickin' Mormon. He was still a racist Nazi. Don't tell me we need some guy that is a war hero or that can get along with the Democrats. We had that. John McCain. He lost. Don't tell me we need somebody that's going to reach across the aisle and try and get along with the Democrats. We had that. George W. Bush. And Romney was a loser, and McCain was a loser. Political losers, I mean, obviously. We can discuss the other stuff ad nauseum, I'm sure. So don't tell me we don't need a fighter in the White House now. We do. We need a fighter in the White House that's going to hit back twice as hard when he gets hit. And we, as patriots, need to do the same exact thing. Ideologically, not talking about grabbing the guns and starting a revolution or anything. We can still win this fight culturally and politically. Anyway, I didn't mean for this episode to be such a Debbie Downer. I guess all the Kavanaugh stuff that I was trying to avoid just got into me, and I just see, Republicans that don't want to fight or aren't willing to fight. So anyway, don't be one of them. Fight the good fight. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I will see you next week on Publitarian Podcast. Thanks, guys.
Listening to Publitarian Podcast. Copyright 2018.